Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers! Welcome to another episode of Video Ferox, where we're knee-deep in Blaxploitation History Month. What's tonight's movie? We're going to be watching the spiritual sequel to 3 the Hard Way, Take a Hard Ride. Let's bounce the trailer to you guys, and be back in a couple of seconds.
The Western. No other form of motion picture can match its power, its adventure, its drama. Now, 20th Century Fox presents a film that rides with the great Westerns. Take a Hard Ride, when you've got to take $86,000 across 900 miles of danger. There's only one way to go. Take a hard ride. These two men swore they would do it.
We ride together. I protect your tail, you watch mine.
Half the West swore they wouldn't.
Let's show them the way.
Take a Hard Ride, starring Jim Brown as Pike, the loner. To some men, death is a way of life. Lee Van Cleef as Kiefer, the bounty hunter.
Are you going after Pike too?
I might just be the one that's gonna kill him.
As sly as a rattlesnake, and twice as deadly. Fred Williamson as Tyree, the gambler.
I certainly would call this a fine hand.
He could deal from the bottom of the deck, or the barrel of a .45. Catherine Spock as the woman. She crossed an ocean to find freedom. All she found was trouble. Jim Kelly as the half-breed. He never said much. He never had to. Barry Sullivan as the marshal.
I can handle that myself.
You've already buried a dozen men who said the same thing.
With justice on his side and murder on his mind. Dana Andrews as Morgan. The money was his. The risk was theirs. When you've got $86,000 in a land where life isn't worth a nickel, you've got no friends. An army of enemies. And only one thing to do. Take a hard ride.
Alrighty, welcome back from the trailer to Take a Hard Ride. Now, this one's a little bit of a cheat because it's not a strictly blaxploitation movie. It's a spiritual, like I said in the intro, a spiritual successor to 3 the Hard Way, because it's got Jim Kelly, Jim Brown, and Fred the Hammer Williamson in it. And it was made to kind of cash in on the success of 3 the Hard Way, but it has nothing to do with that movie.
It's a little easier to follow. I mean, not that there's any problem with following 3 the Hard Way, but this one is...
This one's very linear. This is A, B, C. More of a series of vignettes than an actual narrative.
You really only get character development on the 2 primary characters. Maybe there's a little bit on Lee Van Cleef's character, but there it's a lot more subtle. This has a friendliness, a charm to it that's, you know, you can kind of see this movie just wandering into the saloon and flopping down on one of the tables and says, whiskey.
You've got Morgan, and played by Dana Andrews, and he's only in the movie for like about 2 minutes. Just long enough to be the trailhead boss and give the money to Jim Brown and says, hey, you've got to get this back down to our hometown because they desperately need this money. And so he's got, $85 million or whatever it is. He throws it in a couple of saddlebags and off across the Old West he goes. Runs into... Actually, no, I fucked up. It opens with Lee Van Cleef being an absolute badass motherfucker.
He's a smart bounty hunter. He goes after old bounties, ones that people aren't really paying attention to anymore. The heat's off on the ones that he's going after, and he doesn't have a lot of competition for those, which is probably why he's doing it. Maybe they're also because they're lower level bounties. Maybe the targets are a bit easier for him to deal with. But it's a very sensible approach to being a bounty hunter, because when you're going after the big name bounties, those are usually really dangerous men, and there's a lot of other bounty hunters gunning after them. So this strikes me as being a very sensible approach, but he goes after the guy when he's going to church.
It's like, rolls out the poster. It's like, oh, look at you, Mr. Frank. We're going to come get you. And it's like, hey, I know that dude. I don't. And then just out and gun, and there it is.
We should also mention that there's rumors about Pike and the money that he's carrying get floating all around town, and some of the ne'er-do-wells pick up on this, and also Tyree, the gambler.
We first meet the Hammer when, in fact, he is in the middle of a card game and he gets dealt that's a losing hand. So what's his response? Take his bag of snakes and tip them over in the saloon. And everybody freaks the fuck out because suddenly there's cottonmouths running around all over the place. And he's like, I thought we were playing cards, not shooting at snakes, as he's slyly slipping cards out of his sleeve up into his deck and winning the match.
A particularly comical note about the snakes involved is when Snake is crawling across the floor, they give it a rattlesnake sound effect. This isn't a rattlesnake. It isn't even a pit viper. It is some presumably non-venomous snake that doesn't even have the right shaped head.
Brad, how many times have we seen stock footage of animals from continent A appearing on continent B throughout the Video Nasty project? So getting a snake that doesn't have the right shaped head and has a rattle sound effect laid over it, it's fucking Italy, man. That's how they roll.
I just thought it was funny that it had the rattlesnake sound effect, and it was clearly no rattle on the tail.
And so Jim Brown and the Hammer, they wind up hooking up in a gunfight. And it's like, hey, man, I've got a gun and you need protection and you've got a ton of cash. Why don't I ride with you and cover your back? Except I loved the twist that those two actually have an antagonistic relationship, because the Hammer is very clearly and very open. It's like, look, I don't want those bastards to get your money. I want to get your money. So I'm going to protect your ass all the way down to Mexico and your town, and then we're going to have it out and I'm going to take your money. All the way through this. He's blatant as hell.
The thing that's wonderful about this is Pike is totally in agreement with it. He's like, okay, yeah, I can use the extra help. And although he doesn't say it, you get the distinct impression he's totally confident in his ability to take this guy when it comes down to them throwing down.
So Jim Brown, he is essentially how can I put this? I don't mean this in a pejorative way. He's kind of an Uncle Tom to Morgan, the trail boss, where he's got honor. He's very.
I think probably a more politically correct way of putting it is that Pike is Morgan's number one guy. He is his top cowboy.
And he also happens to have a vested interest in the town that he's going to, because you kind of get the impression that's his town too.
Yeah. I think Morgan not only wants to settle down there, but he's going to take some of his top boys and they're going to settle down there with him, and Pike happens to be one of those.
And so these two ride off through the West, and bad guys just come at them left, right, and center. And that's pretty much the bulk of the movie.
What's interesting about the bad guys is Kiefer, Lee Van Cleef's character, is being very cagey about this. He's learned that Pike is a badass and is very good at fighting. And so he basically is like, I don't really want to go toe-to-toe against this guy, but I want that money. And I want the bounty that he's got, an old bounty that everybody else except me has forgotten about. So I'm going to recruit as many thugs as possible and throw them at this guy.
Basically, all these thugs are a meat shield between the Hammer and Jim Brown and Lee Van Cleef.
Two of the guys are kind of interesting because they're cowboys that Morgan had in his employ, but they were bad employees. And these guys, once Morgan gives them their pay and lets the contracts expire, they just basically go out and start scavenging. And Kiefer rounds them up and basically bullies them into working for him.
So I don't remember the guy's name, but he's not like as big a character actor as George Buckflower, but he was one of those faces in Hollywood that you'll look at him and say, where do I know you from? He was the that weird, quirky preacher from Mork and Mindy from the first season. Exidor or Exegol or whatever the hell his name was.
He was one of the two scavengers, wasn't he?
Yeah, one of the scavengers, yeah.
Okay, which one was he?
He was the one with the really skinny face.
Oh, the dark one. Okay.
The dark one, yeah.
Right. Okay. I thought he looked familiar too, but I didn't bother tracking him down. I was like, I figured I knew him from another Western as just a supporting character.
Oh, you probably saw him in he's in a dozen A-Team episodes and Knight Rider and Magnum PI, and he's been around.
The Southerners, the Confederates that had turned renegade and gone out into the West, the ones that Kiefer recruited, the ones that had the machine gun, the preacher type for that group and his number one guy, the guy they called Angel, the one that was wearing the Confederate soldier cap.
Oh, right, the one with the white shirt.
Yeah, the one with the white shirt. I recognize both of those guys from I don't know where, but they were like, oh yeah, I've seen these guys before.
And so that's pretty much the pace of the movie, is that it's just action beat, action beat, action beat, a little slowness here, and then action, action, action. So the movie, as far as a visceral pleasure goes, I derive a great deal from it, just because it's, hey, we've got a gunfight, and now it's a fist fight, and now it's a horse chase, and now it's down a mountain, and then there's a bridge, and now we're cutting the bridge, and now people are falling off the bridge, and there's all sorts of action, and there's a fist fight. So you really can't go 2 minutes without something happening in this movie.
When it's not actual action happening, it's some sort of character interaction that's going on. Usually it's between Brown and Williamson, but it's often involving other characters, like, for example, Kiefer doing his recruiting of his various goons, or interaction between the two guys and the woman named Catherine. There's some interesting character interplay going on.
I really liked the scene where it's very early on in the movie, and the Hammer and Jim Brown are still kind of getting to know each other and whatnot. They're riding along, and they run into Lee Van Cleef coming up the trail the other way, and it's this narrow cliffside mountain pass trail. And they're like, well, what you going to do? Well, one of us is going to have to step aside. And they're like, well, who's going to step aside? Go down this way or go this way? And so it's very much establishing a dominant sort of thing between the three. I wish the movie had more scenes like that, because after this one moment, Lee Van Cleef and Jim Brown and the Hammer really never lock eyes ever again.
Except at the end. Yeah. There's a early moment, very early in the movie.
Oh, when they're coming into town.
When the ranchers are coming into town. And you get this one bit between Pike and Kiefer where they're locking eyes with each other, and Kiefer is looking thoughtful. And you get the distinct impression, based on what we saw of his character earlier, that he's considering whether or not this guy's got a bounty, how old it is, how much of a risk it is, and he's also noticing that Pike's got all these other guys around with him too, all these other ranchers. So he's like,
He's essentially casing the joint.
Yeah. And then later when he hears that Pike's let out on his own with all this money, he's like, oh. The risk assessment has gone dramatically down now. He's much safer to go after.
Exactly. So while I love this movie to pieces, there's one thing that bugs the fuck out of me, and if we were doing video nasty stuff with this I would land on the list because of this. The horse falls and the general animal cruelty in this movie. It's an Italian Western, so this kind of comes part and parcel with the territory. But there's like this one scene where they're chasing the two. They're chasing the Hammer and Jim Brown, and they're at the top of this mountain, and they go down this really steep, not a cliff, but kind of your Calgary Stampede run sort of thing. And it's unsimulated horses tumbling down this hill. And I'm like, oh, fuck you, movie. I don't like this.
Not only is it very steep, but it's also a very sandy slope. And, you know, I felt really sorry for the horses in that particular one.
Oh, there's tripwires throughout all the thing. I mean, there's horse falls all throughout this.
Yeah. It was gratuitous as far as I was concerned. I don't like to see cruelty to animals, particularly not intelligent ones like horses.
Well, it's not like Heaven's Gate where they actually blew up fucking horses with fucking dynamite. That movie, I'm tirading. No, well, never mind. We're moving on.
This is not a very good movie on many other levels either.
But we're not reviewing Heaven's Gate. We're reviewing Take a Hard Ride.
That's right.
So we get halfway through the movie, and that's where we meet the other of the three, where we finally meet Jim Kelly. Where there's this, they're riding along and they hear some gunfire off in the distance, and they come running up, and that's where they find these bandits attacking this one woman and her half-breed. Okay, Jim Kelly's not a half-breed, but just go with it. And they're attacking the wagon, and they come riding in and start blazing away with their guns, and Jim Kelly does some kung fu, and poor old Catherine Spock, she doesn't really do anything.
She's an interesting character because, for starters, she's French, and that's not something you really see all that often in Westerns.
She is a prostitute, which we see a lot of in Westerns.
Yeah. Her husband was part of the party that was there, that was being attacked, and that she is one of the two only survivors from. And although you can tell she's grieving a bit, she's not totally broken up by it. She's taking it in stride, which on one hand is okay. It's a reasonable reaction when you know you've got to be on the run and you've got to go and find a place of safety, and then you can break down and grieve about it. But on the other hand, it seems kind of callous. And she does explain later that she did not really love her husband, but still, it's I didn't really like that aspect of her character.
She's got a couple of interesting character developments, like where after she hooks up with the two, and then Jim Kelly comes along, so we've got our quartet. And they go into this box canyon thing, and the bad guys are riding in, and Jim Brown and Jim Kelly are out doing, kicking ass on the bad guys, and the Hammer's back here blazing away with his rifle. And she takes the money and stashes it under a rock, and then takes the saddlebags and runs off with it. And then all the bad guys are saying, well, wait a second, holy shit, let's get her because she's got the cash. And they start chasing her with the machine gun, and it's this actually pretty decent chase, and then they kill her. But was like, okay, that was kind of an interesting, why did you do that? Okay, I guess because you're suddenly burst of heroicism. It was a weird, out of nowhere bit of agency.
There is kind of a bit of an explanation for it just after, where Pike and Tyree are talking about it, and one of them, I don't even remember which one, says, oh, I guess she found something to feel for, and it's a little bit clumsy, I think.
There's a couple of weird choices in this movie where something like that happens, where I'm like, it's kind of clumsy and doesn't fit very well with the rest of it. Here we're at the beginning of the third act, and we're at the point where, a competent director. Okay, not that Antonio Margheriti is incompetent or anything, but you know what I mean. If he had a clear vision, he would put his foot on the gas and just accelerate like a motherfucker. Where here in the movie as presented, we get, all of a sudden, I got to get a horse because my horse ran away, so we got to get a shoe. Hey, the shoe's like this, so I'm going to go do some smithing. And then there's a little bit of character interaction in the smith place. And I'm like, you really should be building up to climax, not giving us more character development here.
Okay, I can sort of understand slowing down a little bit on the gas after the action of the getting to where you're supposed to be.
Right.
But he drew it out a little bit too long, in my opinion.
It almost felt like the Box Canyon sequence should have been the climax. And okay, now that we've gotten away and they've done that little the wagon over the cliff jump thing, okay, that felt like a climax. We should be wrapping up. Well, wait a second, we got another 20 minutes to go. What the hell? So yeah, there's a couple of weird puzzle pieces that don't quite fit.
Also, while I liked the climax, I felt it could have been handled a little bit better. They did do a build-up to it, but it kind of finished up too quickly, in my opinion. With all those Mexican thugs that had gotten recruited, there should have been more of a fight, more drawn out, rather than just blowing them all up.
They probably didn't have the budget for having hundreds of extras.
Yeah, that's probably true. Okay, I liked the sensibility of that strategy. I mean, blowing them all up instead of having a fight is, well, more sensible. But on the other hand, it
was viscerally satisfying.
Yeah.
Although we did get a bunch of a fight in the Box Canyon just a few minutes before, so I guess maybe my gun play lust was satisfied.
To a degree. There just should have been more fighting, more gunplay, and more drama. I mean, and while I liked this thing, Kiefer didn't get involved in the final fighting at all. He just is sitting there up on the ridge, watching everything come down, and while he meets the eyes of Pike and Tyree, he just was like, and rides off. It's like he decided, okay, not worth the risk anymore. And while that's sensible and pragmatic and intelligent, it's not really all that satisfying as a viewer to just see the villain decide, oh, I'm going to leave you guys alone now.
I mean, I guess maybe because they got the money to the town. Okay, the game is over. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. It wasn't very satisfying at all.
We know he's a badass. That got established in the very first scene. And there's a wonderful interplay with the three of them on the trail. But no, Lee Van Cleef didn't do anything.
I want to talk about the music for a second, which when we're talking a blaxploitation movie, that comes with certain expectations. However, this being a hybrid blaxploitation spaghetti western, all of a sudden your Isaac Hayeses and your funky waka chickas are out the window for a much more traditional. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith did the score and he fucking crushed it, but it's not funky.
No, I would agree with you there. It's a great score. And I thought it was very, very well put together.
It's big, it's sweeping, it's grand. It's not at all like your Sergio Leone's spaghetti western dollars sort of things.
This has some definite production value to the soundtrack.
It's more closer, I guess I would put it, to The Magnificent Seven than the Dollars movie.
This one is interesting because it's kind of like a hybrid between a spaghetti western and an American-produced western, because it's got elements that are more like a American western. Because, I mean, the soundtrack, for one thing, the appearance of the sets and the costuming and the props is all high quality.
It has a very studio look to it, which you're not too far off from it because this was a co-production between Italy and 20th Century Fox. So the movie does straddle the line between traditional American Western and your spaghetti Western.
I was having just a darn time trying to place the setting of this. I mean, I know the Mojave Desert pretty well. I've been there more places or more times than any other place in California. And I know that there's a ton of Hollywood stuff that's filmed there because it's just on the other side of the San Bernardino Mountains. I was watching this going, where on earth is this?
Because they tricked you. This wasn't shot in Italy. This wasn't shot in the American Southwest. This was shot on the Canary Islands, which gives the movie an entirely different look from Companeros and the Once Upon a Time in the West and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah, and when I was watching the end credits and realized that, I was like, oh, well, that was actually really well done of them. Because,
Oh, it gives the movie a distinctive look, for
yeah,
sure.
it does. And I would think that if you're doing something on the cheap, putting around on the Canary Islands would be a good idea because it's a very compact location. And you can move just about everything around by boat. So it's probably, if you're doing something that involves a lot of changing the scenery, this is a great idea.
For a blaxploitation movie, okay, 50% blaxploitation movie, it doesn't have a lot of your typical social message to it. It doesn't have your fight the man. Jim Brown is in fact working for the man. So it's very light indeed, as far as the rest of the genre goes.
There's comparatively little social commentary. There is some, but it's kind of glossed over.
So it's not quite as heavy as something like Boss Nigger, but it is fun enough, and it's fine, and I enjoyed the hell out of it, so fuck it. Let's just go on to the next segment. All right, Brad, did you Take a Hard Ride?
Yes, I did. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I think the movie is fine enough. I enjoyed it. I owned it. I like it. I've watched it several times. So it's fine. It's fun. I enjoyed it.
I think it's a good, solid story.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I would agree with you, it's not one of the top level Western movies that I've seen. I mean, hands down, Good, Bad, and the Ugly is vastly superior to this. But, on the other hand, this one's fun.
All right, so 2 reasonably enthusiastic thumbs up. Not yes, but really good, solid flick. So there you go. And we'll catch you next week.
Now these are just swell, and this rings the bell. The popcorn is crispy and hot. Then others again have a terrible yen for a drink, then hit the spot. Go, go. So if you want candy, the lobby is handy. A condo with suite and a crew. With your kind permission, we'll have intermission. We're ready to serve all of you.
Well, that wraps it up for Take a Hard Ride, and that wraps it up for Blaxploitation History Month. Because next week, it's back to the Video Nasties. What's the movie? I have no fucking clue. So why don't you come back and join us next week, and we'll find out together. It'll be a voyage of discovery. In the meantime, please drop us email, thevideonastyproject@gmail.com. And until we meet again, friends, stay funky!
Why should I trust you any more than them?
Because they're dead, and you want to stay alive.